Hello and welcome back to Talk About Strange. On my second episode here today. My first episode was Bigfoot related. This one's going to be more of the supernatural, paranormal. We got a really good ghost story here to tell. It kind of goes back to the old days, so it's really cool. That's going to be a lot of fun. One of our friends, Jeff, shared a really cool picture with us, so I wanted to share that. Actually shared a couple pictures, but the first one was a Bob Gimlin photograph. I might put it up here anyway. That's because that's more Bigfoot related, but it's a really cool picture. And then he showed this other one. So this is kind of a cool story that goes right along with the picture. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you. It's just really brief, but it's really cool. Steve, a limb fell off a tree at a residence couple who lived on my mail route. I would see the lady outside the yard pulling weeds and tending to her flowers. She always seemed sad. One day I pulled over and got out of the vehicle and said hi and asked her if she'd seen the art on her tree. I pointed out the tree limb break and she instantly lit up. She saw what I saw, angel wings. I told her to look closer and tell me what else you could see. If you blow up the picture a bit, you can see what looks like two people, and on the left it looks like Jesus, on the right Mother Mary. I hope you can see it too. The lady thanked me and I finished my mail route with a smile on my face. Jeff, yes, I don't blame you. You did a great thing there. Now every time she looks at that, she's going to see that and it's going to make her smile and probably feel better about whatever ails her. Isn't it wild though? It does. It looks like a perfect set of angel wings. And then you look closely and it really does look like Jesus and Mary, or a face, two faces. And it looks like they're almost holding hands or something. So that's really cool, Jeff. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's not just going to make her happy, but everybody that sees this, it's going to make happy. So really cool stuff. Thank you. All right. That was that. Let's get on to this story. I got a really good story for you here, if I can find it again. Old soul like mine. All right, here we go. Let's dive right into this. I'll begin with what my mother told me. My mother always said she wondered if our family was being followed by something or even cursed. But I don't know if that has always been the case, or if we were somehow more intuitive to things and, like light shining in the dark, just seemed to attract them. Though I do think at some point something that crossed our path did attach itself to us, just based on everything that has happened in our lives over the years. Today, though, I will focus on stories my mother told me about her own and other experiences. My mom told me when my grandfather, her dad, was a boy back in the 1940s, he and his family sat listening to the sounds of footsteps coming up the back steps and the screen door opening. The heavy steps then crossed the kitchen and stopped at the wood box by the wood-burning stove, lifted the lid and dropped an armload in, and headed back outside. No one knew what to think as they stared at each other about the noise they had heard, or about the fact that the cat had run upstairs and was hiding under the bed, refusing to come out. But when my great-grandfather went back to check, the kitchen and screen door was still locked, and there was no more wood in the wood box than what was there, and the axe was still stuck in the stump out back, exactly as it had been left. This would happen multiple times while they lived in this house, but they never saw anything. I've heard of stuff like that. That's wild. Just still working away. It's too bad it wasn't filling that wood box, though. That'd be cool. On another occasion, my grandfather was going to stay the night at a friend's house, and they were riding their bikes to get some clothes for the night. It was almost dark, so they were trying to hurry as they were meant to be back by then. They decided to take a shortcut through the woods and cut off some time. But as they rode by, they began to hear heavy sounds of footfall on the trail behind them. Both boys were terrified and pedaled as fast as they could to get out of the woods. But any hope they had of leaving whatever was chasing them in the woods when they reached the neighborhood on the other side was dashed by the burst of through the woods and the last of the trees and out onto the road, because almost as quickly both began to hear the sound of claws hitting the pavement behind them. Neither one dared to risk looking back or glancing, as it might slow them down, and the fear of what they might see. Sound like a hellhound. But as they approached the front gate of my grandfather's house, they knew that it wasn't wide enough for both of them to ride through at once. And since neither one of them were willing to go through last, they simply wedged both bikes in the narrow opening together and jumped off, running up the sidewalk to the door. They burst into the house, so out of breath and barely able to stand. Looking out the window, they saw nothing that would explain their state, and it was several minutes before the parents could get anything out of them about what was going on. When they finally did begin to explain, it was still hard to understand exactly what had happened. My grandfather's first assumption was that maybe one of the hunting dogs had gotten out and began chasing them in the woods, simply began to follow the boys and then passed by. But when he checked, all the dogs were accounted for and none of them were panting or showed any sign of chase. So he called his friend down the road and asked about his dogs and learned the same. The boys were scolded for taking the shortcut close to dark, as they were told previously not to do that, and both promised they would never do it again. My friend's parents contacted, and needless to say, they spent the night at my grandfather's house instead. They never knew what that was that chased them that night, and no one ever saw anything, and no one in the neighborhood, none of the dogs showed any interest in whatever it was. But even though many chalk it up as maybe a black bear or large stray dog, my grandfather and his friend were never quite sure. Later on, after he grew up and married my grandmother, he would be at work one night and my grandmother home with my young mother and her sister, my aunt. Having them already tucked in and asleep, my grandmother herself would get into bed and pick up her new book and begin reading. She read for a bit and then closed the book, put it back, making sure to keep her place, turned the light down, and fell asleep. Almost immediately, she was startled and jumped up to turn the light back on, as she had clearly felt unmistakable sensation of someone getting in bed next to her. But when she flicked the light back on, no one was there. Without hesitation, she threw her robe and slippers on. She took the book from her nightstand and threw it in the trash bin outside. That book happened to be The Exorcist. Yeah. My mother herself would have her own first encounter with the paranormal as a teen, shortly after moving to Las Vegas with my aunt and mother after her grandparents divorced. She and her sister were invited to a party with their new friends and decided to go. When they got there, my mom would say that she noticed some kids sitting around a table on the other side of the room, and she asked the person what those kids were doing. Using a spirit board, they replied, to which she outwardly responded, I don't believe in that stuff. But internally, her interest was piqued and she thought, only to herself though, not out loud, if this is real, what's my address? And just a few seconds later, there was a commotion at the table. When she asked somebody what was wrong, the people had been using the board said that in the middle of answering one of the questions, it stopped and started pointing to numbers and letters. And they called out what those were. My mom and aunt just looked at one another because they were both knew what it was. It was their old address from Georgia where they had previously lived. Hey, that's a trip. That set you back. I hope this hasn't been too long as introductions go, but I will leave you with one final story she told me for now. Though this one isn't concerning her family, but the family of a guy that she used to date. He was from Mexico and had grown up quite poor. When he was a boy, his family lived in a very small house outside of town. They didn't even have a front door, just an opening with a blanket that hung over them at night. It was a cool night and he woke up chilled. He thought because his brother had taken all the covers. So as he was pulling the blankets back, trying to cover up, he said, give me some covers, I'm cold. To which a deep, unearthly voice from the direction of the doorway responded, yes, give him some covers, he's cold. Almost mocking him. Being quite young still and unsure at that point if there was an intruder or something, the old foot pedal sewing machine his mother and grandmother would use that sat in the middle of the room started going faster than he'd ever seen it before. He always said he was certain he met the devil that night. Wow. I had very many personal experiences of my own as well, but thought I would start with these to help build up my courage towards sharing them, as they are a lot more different and difficult for me to go over. I don't know if you'd consider it PTSD or anything, but I definitely relive all the fear and emotion that I experience when I allow myself to think on it or the thought to share them. But I think that it could be therapeutic to get them all out and might help me deal with it all to do this. So if you are okay with it, I will share them a few at a time with you, and you can decide if they're worth using on your channel or not. Thank you and have a good night. Well, yes, they're worth using on my channel, and thank you. I really appreciate it. Those are really awesome stories. Anybody who enjoys a good ghost story is going to enjoy them because they are good ghost stories. I remember when I was a kid, sitting underneath, we had a staircase, and we used it as a secondary, like a wood crib. And it wasn't always full of wood, but we'd sit in there with the radio and listen to the ghost stories on the radio. And I used to really enjoy that. I don't know why, that just gives me a flashback of that memory. Anyway, thank you for sharing that with us. I don't think I got anything else, do I? What else? Do I have something else here on that? Ooh. Okay. Yeah. What is this? We got another little short story here. All right. Let's do this one. You may call me June Rose, not my real name. I have had 3 encounters with those that have crossed over. The first time was a few days after my baby passed away. I'm very sorry to hear that. We had the kids down for a nap and decided to lay down and just hold each other. I looked down and saw my baby crawling across his dad's leg. I blinked hard and the baby was gone. After a lot of time, my other children had grown up. I was driving and had my grandchild in the back seat. My grandchild informed me that Grandpa was going to die. I told my grandchild nothing was wrong with Grandpa. A few months later, we found out that he was terminal. My husband passed away a year later. Oh man, sorry. A few months passed and I was visiting my child and grandchildren. The same grandchildren was put to bed. A little later, I went to bed. My grandchild came into the bedroom and climbed into the bed with me. Understand, it was the child's spirit that came in, as the child was still in bed sleeping. My grandchild had brought my husband to me. He laid down beside me and talked to me for a minute, and was gone. A few months had passed, and my husband came back to me again. He had a woman with him that I think was my mother, or was his mother. I looked at him and asked if he'd come for me. He had such a sad look on his face. He informed me that it was not my time. I know this is not long, but just decided I should share it. June. Oh, wow. Thank you, June. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's amazing. And I'm really sorry for your losses. It sounds pretty tough. And, I think it's just a really nice, comforting confirmation that he gave you, and letting you know that he's okay. I mean, if that other person was his mother, he's letting you know that he's okay and he's happy, and that everything's going to be okay. So I think that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. You guys, don't be afraid to share your stories with us. Send them in. We'll share them. It's really cool stuff. It's a lot of fun, and it's really interesting, and it helps a lot of people. So it's a really good thing. All right, so that's it for today. You guys have a wonderful evening. I really enjoyed this. I hope you did, and I will see you again really soon.